Okay, so I've started recording. Okay, so one important thing also that you have to be familiar with is the Global Gap website. You know, sometimes you think that, oh, this is just a website, but it's part of the sources of information for you as a consultant. One, because that is where they put updates. And two, they put important announcements there. This announcement about the local gap, I've been on the website for some time, last week and this week, I didn't see it. And it is only this morning that Western drew my attention to it. So you see that I would have missed it, even though it's on the website, and I wouldn't even know about it. So we'll learn how to navigate within the website because yes, you need to know about that. So the website is important. You can download all these documents we have mentioned, all these documents, plus many others on the website. And you are not supposed to pay or anything. So you can download the latest version of all the documents, the checklist and all of that. And for you as a consultant, the inspection methods and justification guidelines can also help you to know how to put interpretation on the clauses when you are helping a client. So you can get that document as well. So www.globalgap.org, you should visit there. Now let's look at some of the key issues you should be familiar with when you are helping your client. Now, if you enter into any relationship with a client for implementation of Global Gap, these 8 issues here should be your key focus. Infrastructure, traceability, risk assessment, lab test and analysis, management plans and policies, procedures and work instruction, training, record keeping. So these 8 key things, when you are developing any Global Gap implementation system for any company, you should be able to interrogate these issues carefully vis-a-vis the requirement and know whether your client is complying with these things, because these are the key issues that the requirements are talking about. And they talk about these things in various ways that if you are not familiar with the requirement, your interpretation may be wrong. So these 8 issues here also, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. You should take note of them and they should form your headline. Even if you are doing a needs assessment, they should form your headlines. So when you enter into the company, you check the infrastructure, whether they have compliant infrastructure, you check the traceability, their risk assessment, whether they have done some analysis in terms of soil, water, etc., etc. Then their management plans and policies, because you know that Global Gap standard requires companies to have some management plans, policies, and procedures in place. You should check that. Then the work instructions, then their training. There are specific training that must be undertaken by the company for their staff, and then their record keeping. Once you are able to satisfy yourself that your client is meeting all the requirements concerning these issues, you can say confidently that your client can pass an audit. So these things should be your key focus. There are other areas, but these things, when your client is complying, your client has more than 90% chance of getting certification on the first attempt. So we will look at them one after the other. Let's look at infrastructure. What are the necessary infrastructure that a client must have in place? You see, Global Gap will not tell you that build a a hygiene station or do this or do that or do that. They are saying that there should be hand washing facilities available. However, the client is going to provide the hand washing facility depends on the strength and resources available to the client. So it is up to you, the consultant, to know that based on the circumstances of the client or based on the operation arrangement, this nature and manner of hand washing facility is more suitable and it will cost less or it will cost more. You need to know that. Then Global Gap also talks about storage for agrochemicals, for fertilizer, for other implements, such as the knapsack, etc., etc. Global Gap is not going to tell you that build a chemical store of 1 meter by 2 meters. No, they will not tell you that. They will not tell you that when you build your chemical store, use wood or brick. No. They have stated some requirements that every chemical store must have in order to be compliant with their requirements. So it is up to you to ensure that whatever resources the chemical, whatever chemical storage that your client has, that storage facility is compliant with the requirement. It doesn't matter whether it's big or small, but it must meet the basic requirement. So let me give you a typical example. They are saying that the chemical store must have security integrity. When they say security integrity, it means that it shouldn't be easily accessible in terms of when somebody wants to break in or something. So you go to a client, he has a chemical store, a nicely built chemical store, and then with the door, the door is a wooden door without even lock and key. So the client has all this nice store, the unavailability of lock and key will let the client feel that aspect. So you have to be very critical or you have to pay attention to details when you go to the client site and observe some of these petty things. Another example is that in the chemical store, there should be shelves and the shelves should be impervious. However, the client is going to build the shelves and whatever means by which the client is going to achieve the state of imperviousness of the shelf, nobody is going to impose it on the client. But at the end of the day, the shelf should be available and it shouldn't retain water. It shouldn't retain spillage. It should be impervious. So somebody can have a metal shelf, which is how do you call it? A smooth surface. Somebody can have a wooden shelf, but the person can develop a means by maybe lining the surface of the wood with an impervious material. All these are ways that the client can meet that requirement. Then produce handling. When we talk about produce handling, we are talking about all the stages where the produce are handled, especially in the pack house. And there are requirements about this produce handling stuff. And they are not going to tell you that wash your produce or this should be how you should handle your produce. They have specific requirements that the produce shouldn't be easily, the process should not encourage contamination and so on and so forth. So it is up to you, the consultant, to study the produce handling practices of the organization in terms of the infrastructure installations and advise them that, look, this thing, if you do it that way, it will encourage cross-contamination or it will encourage loss of produce quality and so on and so forth. So it is up to you to help your client to understand the requirements and implement it. Then workers. There are several requirements also about workers. For example, workers' changing room is an infrastructure requirement. So the changing room, they say there should be changing room for male and female. and the changing room should have lockers. So this changing room for male and female, which will have lockers, how are they going to do it in terms of the available resources and the scale of operations for the company? It is up to you to go into the operations of the company and advise them accordingly. If you take a company like, what big companies in Nigeria? Do you have Kajil in Nigeria, Kajil Cocoa?
No, I don't think so. We don't.
Okay, so Kajil Cocoa is one of the biggest cocoa processing companies in the world. If you compare such a company, assuming, and they source cocoa, from the farmers, and they have a cocoa buying company on its own. Assuming such a company is going for certification, cocoa is not part of Global Gap though. Assuming such a company is going for certification versus another company like Global Farmville, I think Kushimo and Tunde know about Global Farmville. These two companies are completely different in terms of availability of resources and availability of and the scale of operations. So you realize that the way both companies will handle infrastructure concerning hygiene will be different. So if they are building toilet facilities by way of complying with hygiene requirements, the two of them have different capacities to invest in that infrastructure. But that shouldn't deter the smaller company from being certified, because the standard is not telling you that build a toilet of this with these specifications. They are just telling you there should be toilet facility on the production site. Whether you have a mobile toilet or whether you have a fixed toilet, it depends on resources and the scale of operation. Then, please, do you have any question or contribution up to this far? Okay. Then, lab test and soil and analysis. There are tests and analysis which must be provided. So one of these is soil tests, residue analysis, tests on inorganic fertilizer, and test on organic fertilizer. These things are straightforward. So when you go and your client hasn't done this test, it's up to you to advise your client that, look, Global Gap requires you to do this test. So when can we have it done? And then they do it. In terms of the fertilizer or inorganic fertilizer analysis, usually the company supplying the inorganic fertilizer or the company importing the inorganic fertilizer, they have done their analysis about the fertilizer already. So Global Gap can accept that. If you, the company implementing the standard, cannot do your own inorganic fertilizer test, they will ask you, or you can advise your client to go to the company they purchased the fertilizer from and get a copy of the analysis they did on the fertilizer and put it on file. It will be accepted. Then for those who use organic fertilizer like manure, cow dung and those things, they also need some analysis. But if they don't use any organic fertilizer, then those analysis will not be required. Talabi, let's hear you. Your hand is up.
Yes, okay, good. Thank you. You talk about analysis of inorganic fertilizer.
Yeah.
I'm a bit confused there. Is it not what is written on the bag? Is it more than that they required? Or on the label of if it is a liquid fertilizer, is it more than that?
Okay.
Is the information required by Global Gap more than what is written on the label or on the bag of the fertilizer for the inorganic?
Okay, so if you look at it, they want it from an accredited source. First of all, when you go into food defense, normally the food defense is talking about adulterated input where maybe they bring you a fertilizer and make some declaration on the label, but the label, what is on the label is different from the actual content of the bag. So that is why they are asking you to do the test. But if the manufacturer of the fertilizer or the dealer of the fertilizer can give you a lab results with the name of an accredited lab on it, that when I did the analysis at the lab, this is what I got, good, they will accept it. So unless on the label they have stated on it that the analysis was done by the lab and the lab can be contacted and all of that, then it will be accepted. But if you don't have any evidence that the analysis on the label was done by an accredited lab, usually not many auditors will accept that, because they are talking about lab analysis, just to be able to verify that what is in the bag is actually what you are getting. This is because of food fraud. This is because of food fraud. Yeah.
Okay, can Mr. Tunde and Mr. Kushimo help throw more light on it, since they are more experienced in this when it comes to application on the field? When they come, what are the references or the analysis they've gotten on when they go to the field with respect to the lab or to the company that produces the fertilizer here in Nigeria?
Okay. So Tunde and Kushimo, the floor is yours if you want to talk. Are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I think when it relates to the inorganic fertilizer, most times the supplier will have it. The information they need, like you mentioned, is more than what is on the label, because sometimes the labels can be adulterated. So, but a simple information from a good supplier can get you the information, and that's the full information that is needed. Because like you mentioned, in case of food fraud, the labels can be adulterated at any point in time, and in fact that is even very, very possible in Nigeria. So just to be really sure, when you are getting from a good supplier, then they should be able to give you that information. So it's something you can get, not that difficult, especially if it's a well-known brand that is well known.
Okay, but in approaching some of these organizations now, has it been easy for you to extract such information from them in Nigeria?
I have not specifically gotten this.
Okay, okay.
I've not gotten this specifically.
Okay, I see.
Okay.
Thank you.
My own advice.
Okay, let me add to that.
Yeah,
this is Olumide.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we can hear you.
So specifically for Jimmy's clarification.
Yeah.
So for every reputable fertilizer manufacturer or supplier, the inorganic fertilizer analysis report is always handy. So you just need to request it. So now where the challenge may be is that for a particular client that you may be working with, he or she or the firm may not be procuring from a single source. You understand? So for instance, there's a firm somewhere in Kano, and they were using OCP fertilizer, OCP Africa, fertilizer. And it was so easy to get all the fertilizer analysis reports. In fact, OCP even provided them additional support by carrying out soil test analysis for them, so that they have a clearer understanding and visibility of the status of their soil profile and nutrient composition. So what I'm saying in essence is, if you're working with clients that are using major fertilizer brands, inorganic fertilizer brands, like Notori, like OCP, like Indorama, like Golden, they are, it's a standard fertilizer, inorganic fertilizer analysis report that is available. And it's the same with organic fertilizer, depending on, who the manufacturer or the producer of that brand is.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Olumide. Thank you, Mr. Kushima. Thank you. Mr. Shaz, you can continue.
Okay,
thank you.
Your hand is up.
I'm just looking at the practicality of all of these things in the context of what we do in Nigeria. Most of the clients or farmers that we work with, as Mr. Olumide has rightly said, many times you see farmers taking on different input providers for the same type of agro input, fertilizer, case in point. So how do we now manage that when we are carrying on audit, where you have customers or our clients having all of these different input providers, which is what is obtainable most of the time, if not all of the time? How do we manage that kind of situation?
Okay, so if in fact I think it's the same in Ghana too, and I have always taken the opportunity whenever I'm doing training for farmers to emphasize on some of these things. I mean, the point has been well elaborated by Olumide, that farmers must have accredited sources of buying their input. And it's very key, because Global Gap talks a lot about food fraud, or it places emphasis on food fraud. And all these things are part of food fraud. Food fraud is not only when somebody comes to sell you cow meat as chicken, which is food fraud. It's also about somebody telling you that my NPK is 15, 15, 15, when in fact the NPK is 5, 5, 5. So it is all about education. I believe that in your work, you have the opportunity to train, come into contact with farmers and provide them with training about some of these things. And they need to get the education, they need to get the information out there. And the fertilizer, inorganic fertilizer, and all this analysis we are talking about, every reputable supplier or every reputable dealer should be able to have it. And when your client approaches you, it's just a matter of making photocopy. Now, one thing that as a consultant, you should, one strategy that you can use to help your client to be compliant with this is that when your client gets probably a receipt of purchase, okay, because advise your client to keep the receipt of purchase. These things can save them a lot. Tell them that do not throw your receipt of purchase away, or your invoice, whatever. That should link, it should link, the receipt of purchase should be linked to the source of the analysis. So if company A gives you a fertilizer analysis report, there should be some connection that you have purchased from that supplier. And in most cases, just one confirmation will be enough for an auditor. So if your client is dealing with several suppliers, and in the ideal situation, all of them must be able to supply the fertilizer analysis. But if all of them are not able to, and a few are able to get it, I think that should be enough to help the client to convince the auditor that they comply with that requirement. So even though you have to advise them to make sure they buy from reputable sources and limit their sources as much as possible, you can also try to find your way around it by making sure that they have some available. They don't need necessarily to get all, but if they have one or two and their receipt of purchase is confirming or is linking the analysis to the company that provided it to them, I think they'll be good to go. Okay, any comment on this or clarification? Said?
Oh, I think this is okay with me. It's okay with me. Thank you.
All right, good. Now let's look at management plans and policies. So this is where you are going to have a lot of work to do. As Tunde told us the other time, some of these things can be tedious, but you should be able to help your client to comply. So most of the management plans and policies are consequential on risk assessment, as we saw in our last session. Most of the management plans that you are going to develop will be consequential on risk assessment. Now, if you develop a management plan, for example, you develop Tunde, is your hand up? Hi, Tunde. Okay. So if you develop a management plan for a client, for example, a site management plan for a particular site, and you present that plan to an auditor, that plan itself is not enough to be accepted by the auditor. The plan should be the result of a risk assessment. So if you didn't do the risk assessment and you presented a plan concerning that issue, the auditor can mark you as not being in compliance with the requirement, because the requirement says that the plan should be based on risk assessment. So when you are supporting your client, most of the plans that you'll be developing, make sure that you have the basis for developing the plan on risk assessment. Then there are other plans also required concerning conservation. So you can go into the standard and look at those ones when you download it. Then there are other plans also required concerning energy use and so on and so forth. So these are some of the plans that you'll be dealing with. Then let's look at the procedures. Okay, so there are basically three major areas of operations where procedures will be required. First, hygiene. So these ones, you see them clearly in the standard or in the control points. There should be hygiene procedure for harvest. There should be hygiene procedure for this. You have to help them to develop that procedure in context of their operation settings. Let me give you a typical example. You go to a company where they are handling mangoes. The mangoes have to be washed before being packed, okay? Then you go to another company, they are handling mango, the same mango, and they are packing the mangoes on the field. The two operations are different in terms of the handling. So you realize that developing the hygiene procedure over there, you have two different scenarios to deal with. And those two hygiene procedures will not be the same. So it is up to you, the consultant, to understand the operations of the client, to help the client to develop the appropriate procedure to suit the operations. So Global Gap is not specifying how the procedure should be, but the procedure must respond to what is happening in the operations. Then there are also procedures required for special implements and special equipment and special tools. So for example, if they have a special machine for either planting or for harvesting, etc., there is the standard is expecting that there should be a procedure in place for operating that machine. because if you don't follow that procedure in operating the machine will give you the wrong results, and that can affect good agricultural practices, or that can affect the outcome of the operation. So this special equipment, if you go to your client and they are using any special equipment for performing some specific operation, you should help them to put the procedure in place about that. And then it is not only about the operation. Even when you are talking about washing, there are some machines, maybe a conveyor belt or a machine they use in the pack house, where dirt can accumulate and it can impact on food safety. Is there a written procedure for washing or for cleaning that machine? All these things, you have to see them, okay, in context of the requirements, and help your client to develop those procedures properly. Now, for special implements and so on and so forth, sometimes the operation manual can do the trick. So advise your client, when they buy any special machine or equipment, they should keep the operation manual. Once the auditor asks you about the procedure for operating that machine or whatever concerning that machine, if you can show it in the operation manual, that will be enough. That will be enough. Then work instructions. So Global Gap is expecting workers to be instructed on specific things they should be doing. For example, when it comes to hand washing, okay, how should workers wash their hands? This kind of instructions are important. When it comes to, for example, packing, it comes to grading. Maybe you are grading mangoes. You are grading 1 kilo, 500 grams, 800 grams, etc., etc. Is there written instructions for the workers about how they should go about that activity? Global Gap is expecting such instructions, and it is up to you to identify your client's operations and know the relevant work instructions which must be developed to meet those requirements. Some of these work instructions are not to be on the paper alone or on the books alone. Sometimes they even require the company to display visibly at a place where all the workers or the relevant workers can see that work instructions. So these are some of the procedures. Then there are also Tunde, we lost Tunde, sorry. Tunde, come in. Okay, so there are also requirements about training. Okay, so they should get training on hygiene. And these are stated in the standard. All the training that they should get, you have to look at the standard and know whether they have had those kind of training. If they haven't had those training, you provide them with that training, or you bring in somebody who can provide it. For example, there is this training on first aid, okay? And they are expecting the workers to be trained, at least one worker. We lost Kushimu also. They are expecting at least one worker to be trained in first aid, and they want guidance for that. So this training must be done. Then training on hygiene and so on. Then training for new workers. Global Gap is expecting that when new workers come on board, they should be trained in the relevant procedures, the work instruction, and so forth and so on. And there should be evidence that this training has been done. So the way your client can prove that they are meeting the compliance requirement concerning training is by keeping training record with the training content stated on the record, not just the name, the date, and the signature. But if they have training on hygiene, what are the topics that were treated under that training? They want it to be documented, and the workers will sign. How does an auditor check training compliance? Normally, most auditors, after they see the training records, they pick one one trainee on the list, and they request to talk to that trainer. And then they will ask the trainer some questions about the training to see. So if you haven't provided the training, or if the company just asks workers to come and sign for the audit, some auditors can go as far as doing that to verify. So it is up to you to know how to play around it to ensure that the workers can be familiar with what they are supposed to be trained in. Okay, so basically, I think these are the key issues I want us to look at today. I promise you 1 hour. Yes, it's exactly 1 hour. Any questions so far? Or contribution? Okay.
You have actually, if you look at the beginning of the slide, you share a list of thematic areas that a consultant should pay attention to.
Yes,
not this, the next one. Exactly. Yeah. I think you've picked some of them already. There are some of them that you've not talked about, like traceability,
yes,
and some of them. So did you skip it intentionally, or
yes,
you still intend to talk about it later another time?
I skipped it intentionally. Risk assessment, we handled it last week or last time. Traceability, traceability is traceability. So so the traceability requirement is simple. There should be a traceability system in place. So I believe that by now, having gone through the course on traceability, it should be possible for you to advise your client on traceability. But
okay, I was just asking if you skip it intentionally, or you intend to.
Because
okay,
I know that
it's
you
fine.
should have treated traceability.
It's fine. It's okay. Yeah, thank you.
So
thank
the
you.
ones that we haven't treated before, so those are the ones that I touch on.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Great. Please, any other question or contribution? Okay, so let's quickly go through the assignment before you handle it, so that it will be easier for you. And I'll be more than willing to support you throughout the assignment on WhatsApp or by any means that you would like. And so let me stop sharing this, and then we look at the assignment in 10 minutes or less before you go. So as I said, there are 2 assignments currently on the page. One of them is about risk assessment, and the other one is on the plans, procedures, assignment. A minute, let me get it. Okay.
Hello.
Hello. I'm trying to share a screen with you. Okay, please, can you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so this is the first assignment, which is dealing with risk assessment requirements in Global Gap implementation. You can download the templates on the page. So here, the instruction is that you have to look at the control point, which deals with risk assessment. So there are 2 documents you have to download. You have to download the control point and compliance criteria document version 5.2, the latest version. and then you have to download this template. So what you have to do is to identify all the various risk assessments that must be conducted by a company implementing Global Gap. Now, when you finish with this assignment, it becomes a resource for you. You can keep it. Anytime you are helping a company to implement Global Gap, you just pick it and you don't need to go through the whole standard again. You just pick it and check on this list which risk assessment you should do or which one you shouldn't do, because probably the client has it already. So the first two are examples I've filled for you. So I went through the standard. I saw that AF 1.2.1, the control point is there a risk assessment available for all sites registered for certification? This includes rented land, structures, and equipment. And does this risk assessment show that the site in question is suitable for production with regards to food safety, the environment, and health and welfare of animals in scope of the livestock and aquaculture certification where applicable? So this is the control point. So the control point is always in the form of a question. And the question is supposed to be answered. The question is supposed to be answered by the one doing the inspection. Okay, so the one doing the inspection is answering this question for Global Gap. So Global Gap is asking you, is there a risk assessment, blah, 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 blah. What you find at the site will help you to answer this question either yes or no for Global Gap. So that is how the control point is. It's always in the form of a question. So this, to comply with this control point, the company needs new site risk assessment or just a site risk assessment. So once you have a new site risk assessment, that means if they are going to begin production on a new site, you should do risk assessment for that site in respect to this control point. So once you have that in place, you are there. Then I look at another one, AF 3.1. Does the farm have a written risk assessment for hygiene? So here, the risk assessment is hygiene risk assessment. Then you just put it there. So when you see any control point which requires risk assessment, you copy the reference number and paste, and then you copy the control point and paste, and then you state the title of the risk assessment. Now, the title of the risk assessment can be anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be what is here. You can decide to name it risk assessment or hygiene or any title you want to give it. But at the end of the day, it should meet the control point here. Hello, Said, let's hear you.
Yes, I think it's very important now for us to have that document. You showed us the last Zoom meeting we had that was showing the more like a comprehensive document where you had all these policies and how they also connected. I think using that template can really, in my own opinion, help us with this assignment in setting the document.
Yeah, it's on the WhatsApp page. You can download it. That presentation is there. And also, when you download the document, when you go to the site, the e-learning page, I have put a link to the document there, the control points and compliance criteria document. When you take that document, you find detailed guidelines on the risk assessment in it. You find very, very detailed guidelines, more detailed than even the one I presented to you before in it, to serve as a guide for you. So please don't forget to visit the e-learning page to download this document. Please, any question on the assignment so far?
Thank you.
Okay. Tarabi, please go ahead.
I think Said is asking not asking for this a slide presentation for the last presentation we did, the meeting.
Okay.
He was asking for a sample of a complete global gap, risk assessment, and also documentation that you have developed before for a claim that you promised to share.
Yes.
If
yes.
I'm correct, Said.
Yes. So
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, I'll share that. But this assignment, you don't even need to go to that far. I just need the title of the risk assessment which has to be conducted. That's all. You don't need to go ahead and go into full details. So, for example, if you look at this one, the risk assessment that is needed, I decided to call it site or new site risk assessment. That is all I need. Then, if you look at the second one, does the firm have a written risk assessment for hygiene? The risk assessment, the risk assessment I need to conduct is hygiene risk assessment. So you just put the name there, hygiene risk assessment or health and safety risk assessment. That's all. So once we finish with this, and I know that you have a list of all the risk assessment that has to be conducted, we will now go into detail to see how to develop this risk assessment. And then we will share the documents there. I hope it's okay. It's okay with that.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Charles, if I can chip in
Go
there.
ahead.
I think this assignment is just a case of we going through the whole control points and extracting specifically anything that has to do with risk assessment.
Yeah.
Okay, it's just for us to extract it and and give it a name.
Exactly.
Whatever is going to be conducted. So it's
Exactly.
not for us to go into the actual risk assessment
Exactly.
at this point.
Exactly. That's exactly.
That's clear.
Thank you, Kushimo.
That's clear. Yeah.
All right. So this is assignment 1. Let me share assignment 2 also. Okay, so this is assignment 2. Please, can you see it on the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so this is also
also
similar to the first assignment, but this has to do with management plans, procedures, and records. So here you are going to go through the standard and extract requirements concerning, for example, if you take site management and site history, you see the title, all the title in the first column, which is title compliance issues, are the same titles in the standard. They are the same titles in the standard. So the standard has been headed. Each requirement or each control point has a heading. So I just copied those headings and brought it to the first column, and I titled it compliance issues. So these are the various issues which has to be looked at when one wants to comply. And then if you take each compliance issue, you come and state whether there is a management plan required, whether there is a procedure required, or whether there is a record required. So for example, if you take site management and site history, the management plan required is risk assessment base. Okay, this should be risk-based management plans for production site. So when you do your risk assessment for the production site, you have to develop a site management plan based on the risk assessment. So I got one here. I didn't find any procedure, so I left it blank. But if you go through and you find some procedure, you can state it. Then what record will be required concerning this issue? Production site risk assessment, it should be a record. So by that time, before you do this management plan, you already have your risk assessment documented. So it becomes a record to support your management plan. Then when you come to hygiene, what management plan concerns hygiene? So you can go through it and check whether there is any management plan concerning hygiene. Then procedure, is there any procedure which must be met when we are talking about hygiene? So here I found two. I found hygiene procedure, that companies must have hygiene procedure. And I also found out that companies must have hygiene instructions. Then another record which must be kept when we are talking about hygiene is hygiene risk assessment for the production site. So if you identify risk assessment for hygiene, when you are, after you develop your management plan and your procedures, that risk assessment becomes a record that is supporting that management plan. Then when you come to the last but one, training. So is there any management plan concerning training? Okay, you can find it if it is. What about procedure? Then I also saw that there should be hygiene training records. When the workers get trained on hygiene, there should be records to support that training. So in that case, I got one training record concerning hygiene. So this is very simple to do, and I'll be very, very happy to support you anytime, anytime you call on me. And you don't need to get everything correct, because we are not talking about getting everything correct. We are talking about how to do it. So this assignment, these two assignments, they are important because they are going to form the foundation for the next stage where we are going to develop these plans. So they are talking about risk management plan for production site. After we identify it in the standard, we now proceed to see how we can develop it. And that point will be very interesting. Now, let me give you one hint here. When you finish with this template, don't throw it away, keep it. It will be important for you one day. You can be updating it when there is a new version, because the information there will be exactly the information you are going to need to provide support for clients. Because once you do it, you don't need to go through the standard again, unless maybe you want to update your template. You become more experienced and more exposed, and you think you can update it and enhance it. But you can still keep this template, and anytime you are supporting a client, if you are talking about site management and history, you go straight ahead and know that if I'm talking about site management and history, I need this management plan, I need this procedure, I need this record. And then you go ahead to check whether your client has it or not. And then you know which ones to develop and which ones to leave out. So once you do this, it becomes your property for use. So give it your best shot so that we can discuss it and improve on it during this training. Please, any questions so far?
So do you have the instruction for the deadline on the e-learning platform?
They are on the platform, yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you can download all the documents also there. But when you have any challenge, please don't hesitate to come to me. Even midnight, I'll be awake to support you. Okay, any contribution or comments?
The schedule on our next Zoom meeting, you want to make clarification on that?
Yeah, so yeah. So I was looking at Friday. so that we can discuss. By that time, you have gone through the assignment, then we can discuss it. Is that okay? But let's keep it tentatively. Oh, we keep losing to the, Let's keep it tentatively. We can discuss it between now and Thursday. We can have it Friday, but the time will depend on you when we reach a consensus.
Okay.
Jimmy, are you okay?
Well, I have to play along with the rest, of course. So if Friday is okay, but if it's going to be Friday, I think we should have certain degree of certainty by now.
Okay.
The time can be, we can communicate on the time, but we know that Friday something is coming on.
Sure.
We've not agreed on the time.
Yeah, sure. So Friday is coming up. It's coming up. So you need to work on these two assignments as fast as possible. Next week, we will start the plans, the development, the actual work. We'll start the actual work. So by the time we start next week, you have all these things there already. You know what plans to touch, all the things to touch on, you by then know. And you know exactly where to find them in the standard. So that is what makes this assignment a good one for all of us. So Friday we will have another Zoom. We can agree on the time, whether morning, afternoon, or evening. That will be by consensus. So, but I want us to have an agreement by Wednesday on the time so that people can plan.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. All right. I'm very grateful for your attendance today. Thanks to you all.
Thanks to you too. Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
And thank you for making yourself available in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. All right, guys. Thank you.
Okay, Jimmy, I'm just hoping that you yourself, you'll not be sleeping by then. Okay, guys, thanks a lot. Have a good evening.
Okay, guys, colleagues,
Right,
bye-bye,
thank you so much
everyone.
for your
Thank
time.
you. Have a
All
nice
right,
night.
bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.